1934. Ooh boy, was this a very forgettable year. In fact, 1934 is actually kind of a forgettable year in animation. Maybe because it was the year that Disney imitation was in full swing? But that's a shame. Because this year's Academy Award winners are actually worth kind of a glance. Both the winner and the nominees. So, who won? The Tortoise and the Hare, a silly symphony by Walt Disney, directed by Wilfred Jackson. It's exactly as the title implies, an adaptation of The Tortoise and the Hare, the fable of the same name. What made this cartoon stand out at the time, however, was not its Technicolor, that was 3-strip, which Disney continued to use, but no, what made this cartoon stand out was both the feel and the pace. This was the first cartoon to experiment with a faster pace than what had been seen before, and it was also the first cartoon to experiment with more slapsticky humor. What I mean is, this cartoon was a precursor almost to how Looney Tunes would react. And indeed, the interpretation of the hare in this cartoon, Max, would actually be an inspiration for Bugs Bunny going forward, per the words of Tex Avery. This cartoon was so successful it got a follow-up, Toby Tortoise Returns, which put everybody in a boxing match and amped the zaniness up to 11, including the speed. This included cameos from other Disney characters and pop culture references, as well as a bit of risk humor. But it's a shame that the tortoise or the hare, neither of them in this short appeared after that one. But yeah, both the tortoise and the hare and Toby Tortoise Returns are very, 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 very important. As for the runner-ups, they were obsessed with elves. I mean, Silver Place has Holidayland, which is kickstarted by an elf leading a little boy through holidays. Jolly Little Elf says it right there, that's a bronze winner. But let's cover the silver winner, because I'm going ahead of myself. Holidayland was a color rhapsody from Columbia, otherwise known as Screen Gems. Screen Gems is kind of forgotten, despite the fact that they love to experiment compared to Disney. It was formed at the end of 1929. When Mintz left Universal for Columbia, he absorbed Harrison and Gold Studio, led by Ben Harrison and Manny Gold, combined it with Sid Marcus's and Art Davis's studio, and basically made that his own. Harrison and Gold were producing Crazy Cat cartoons, initially based on George Herriman's comic strip of the same name, but gradually growing divergent. The Marcus Davis Studios, on the other hand, struggled to find a star. After Toby the Pup failed, a man named Dick Humer came along and invented Scrappy. Scrappy's popularity was so big it surpassed Mickey Mouse's at one point, and even after that remained toe-to-toe with him, so how he remained forgotten is unknown to me. And no, this is not the Scrappy as in the Scooby-Doo Scrappy. That's a long ways away. This Scrappy is a mischievous little boy who has surreal adventures in his neighborhood. Kind of like Flesher's, except more urban and with a touch of the Little Rascals thrown in. He had his own recurring characters, a girlfriend, a bully, some pets. But prior to this, all of Columbia's cartoons have been in black and white. And these guys actually initially distributed Disney's earliest stuff, post Oswald. But how does Columbia do as an animator by themselves? Well, actually, the cartoon is pretty good. Scrappy, this time, Scrappy might as well be Mickey Mouse if he never got over his mischievousness and had the youngness to justify it. This time, he won't get out of bed, and he stubbornly wishes every day was a holiday, so he dreams that he goes to the titular holiday land, where the elf Father Time leads him through a walk of the holidays. Despite the plot, it's actually very surreal, even more surreal than Scrappy's cartoons usually get. Scrappy had a very healthy lifespan, lasting until 1941 with the Little Theater. But after that, he was quickly forgotten, something very unusual for a star character lasting that long. That was also the year the Crazy Cat series was discontinued, which didn't resemble Perryman's strip at all by that point. Moving on to bronze is Jolly Little Elves, another entry in Walter Lance's catalog. This time, Lance co-directs with Manuel Moreno, a longtime animator for the studio who came from Mexico. Moreno would stay until the late 30s, in which he would jump to MGM and stay there until at least the 40s, doing uncredited character design. The story was by Vic McLeod, who was Walter Lance's head storyman at the time, and it was part of their Cartoon Classics series. Jolly Little Elves is basically an adaptation of The Elves and the Shoemaker, except these elves are almost naked and they really love donuts. That song of dunk, dunk, dunk will never get out of your head. The silver and bronze runner-ups, I believe, have a few things in common. They're part of a series whose initial entry starred their then top character. Holidayland, which is the nominee in this case, starred Scrappy, but Cartoon Classics had Toyland Premiere, which starred Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. They also had Elves, as I explained before, and they were the first nominees to be in color. It became apparent that black and white was not doing well against color. But with Disney having exclusive rights to 3-strip Technicolor, that's the really crisp, really good stuff, both Holidayland and Jolly Little Elves, and pretty much any other studio that wasn't Disney, had to settle for the inferior. It was either 2-strip Technicolor that could only display red or blue, or Cinecolor, which very much muted and or saturated the colors to the point you could tell it was inferior. So it was either 2-strip Technicolor or Cinecolor. It would not be until a couple of years later that studios were allowed to produce 3-strip Technicolor cartoons alongside Disney when he let the exclusivity rights lapse. But you can also see that while Holidayland isn't a victim of it, Jolly Little Elves is definitely a victim of being a Disney imitation purely through and through. And ironically, the Disney entry in this year, as I stated before, was a prototype of Looney Tunes. So, with all this Disney imitation going around, I'm not talking just Walter Lance, I'm talking about MGM, Terrytoons, all the like. 1934 is easily a very boring animation year. Ironically, there was a major development this year, 2 of them actually, that shaped the animation business, particularly Disney, going forward. One of these was The Goddess of Spring, another silly symphony that was the first attempt by Disney or any studio to animate realistic humans, and though it looked awkward, it was worth a shot. The other one was another silly symphony called The Wise Little Hen, an adaptation of The Little Red Hen, starring a pig named Peter and a duck named Donald, as they lazily laze away while allowing a little red hen to do all the work by herself. Once they take a stomachache, they learn their lesson after the little red hen makes them brutally pay for it. Now, most of these characters should have faded into obscurity, but the duck, Donald, suddenly proved popular with audiences. He did appear as a minor bit player in Disney comics a few years back, but this was his first major role and first role in animation, and audiences loved his voice provided by Clarence Ducky Nash. So later that year, Mickey Mouse had a cartoon, An Orphan's Benefit, in which he was right alongside Donald. The duck was retooled, particularly by Dick Lundy, to be more brash, more temperamental, more imperfect. In other words, the complete opposite of Mickey. And so it was that Donald Duck would become one of Mickey's greatest friends and the studio's true moneymaker. But my oh my, that is something that is so overlooked. Well, and that's all for that Academy Awards right there. This is the Man from Wackyland, notifying you that was 1934.